Imagine being in a position where you spent years trying to build your skill as a developer and you go into the job market and there are no jobs. So it can be painful. But I was talking to a friend and I realized something. He's a programmer, and one thing I noticed about him is he never identified himself by the roles me and my circle of developers used to identify ourselves. So for example, if you are entering the developer world, they tell you that you need to specify on one particular skill. You're either an AI engineer or a data analyst or a front-end developer or back-end developer or cloud developer or UI designer. So we have this mindset where we put ourselves in this kind of box. That's because when you are learning to code to work in a company, I spoke to him, this is what he said to me. Number one is he never identified himself as a front-end or a back-end or he just learns programming language, Python, HTML, CSS, a bit of pseudo-code programming for games. So he didn't identify himself, he didn't put himself in any box. From his own perspective, he just looks at what he's interested in and he just learns it. And he takes all what he has learned and he puts it together and used to build something. He said to me that this is his approach to building products or building software. I see a problem. I think to myself, can computer technology or can software programming build a solution for this problem? If yes, then he goes on to build it. If no, he leaves it. Now, I find him very, very intriguing because the mentality he has is different from ours. We are always fixed, and that's because we learn to code to get a job. So we need to focus on a particular skill. But we also need to understand that if you learn to code, there are two paths you can take. You can build a career, which most of us try to do, or you can take the entrepreneurial route and build a business. You've learned all these coding skills and there are not much opportunities in the job market. So why don't you just use your coding skills to build a product and try and sell it? So this is the difference in the way people who learn to code to get a job and people who learn to code to build a business or build a product, right? This is the difference in their thinking. Number one, some people are interested in building a career with their coding skills, and there are pros and cons to that. Now, if you're trying to build a career, you need to understand that you need to identify yourself in one specific role. In organizations, generalists are not as valuable as specialists. Okay, you need to specialize because the company needs to know where to put you. Either you're focusing on back-end, focus on back-end specific, leave everything else. You having skills from different areas does not add value to the organization you are working for. So focus specifically on that thing that you are there to do. Make sure your coding is perfect, right? So if you're taking the career route, you need focus. Focus on one tech stack. If you are good with JavaScript and you prefer JavaScript for building applications, use JavaScript. If you prefer Python, use Python. Okay, so focus specifically on one role and one language. And if you can, focus on getting jobs specifically in one industry. For example, because the thing with taking the career route is that every job is a stepping stone to the next. Your CV matters, your history matters, your track record matters. If you have a good track record of working with technology companies in the finance industry, it will be easier for you to get another job with a tech organization in the same finance industry. Okay, so this is the way it goes. So your track record matters, your CV matters, your portfolio matters, and by focusing on one particular industry, you give yourself the chance to, you can become an expert and you can be known in that industry. So focus. Focus on one role, focus on one programming language, and focus on one industry if you can. Understand that every job leads to the other job. And the financial trajectory for people who are taking the career route is like this, okay? Once you get a job, if you are trying to get the next job, you should be bidding for a higher. So your next job should pay you more than the former job you were at. So financially, the trajectory is like this. You can go straight up or you can see it as steps. Each job is a step. Now, if you're taking the entrepreneurial route, your approach has to be different. You can't be a specialist, you should be a generalist. Because before I explain, I have to explain to you how businesses are created. Every big business you know, let's use Facebook, right? It's not just a business, it's a big company. Now, before Facebook was a company, it was one man's idea, or two or three. But it's usually a small group of people or one person's idea. That idea is a product in a basement, in a small office, in your room, somewhere, anywhere. It starts with one person. Now, if you are building a product has plenty parts. You need to be a generalist because you need to understand how all these parts works together to put your product together. Now, if you are building an application, you are building some sort of software, you need to understand good design, user experience design, You need to understand front-end development. You need to understand back-end development. You need to understand a bit of cloud. You need to understand how to manage your project. If you're integrating AI features into your application, you need to understand how to do that. Now, this is the thing about the generalist, about the specialists and the career-focused individuals, right? They need to be expert, meaning that they need to know their programming language to Z, top to down, inside out. Now, if you're a generalist, you don't need to know all of that. You just need to have the minimum amount of basic knowledge you need to build what you need to build. You don't need to understand all of JavaScript. You don't need to understand everything that. You don't need to be as knowledgeable as an AI engineer if you want to integrate AI into an app. A simple crash course, you just reading the developer documentation is enough. Learn enough to put your product together. And some people may also ask that, won't this cause some kind of bug? And this is true. You will see people creating apps by themselves. When they build apps, you tend to see a lot of errors when they are scaling that app, but it is okay. It's perfectly okay. Your job is not to focus on making your application perfect. Your job is to discover if the market actually wants your product. And this is a mistake people make. When a company has been established, that means that the product that the entrepreneur who started that business made has been validated by the market. There's proof that the market wants in terms of money, cash flow, okay? Now, once you understand that there is proof that a market wants something, your job now is not to create a new product. Your job is to improve upon it. So now you need specialists. So really, there is a relationship between the entrepreneur and the career-focused type. The entrepreneur's job is to build products and see if the market wants it. The career-focused types, if you are building an organization, you need to be able to deliver value in a way that the value does not break continuously. You need specialists. If you're an entrepreneur, the fact that your product works 100% correctly is not important. What is important is that it works just enough for you to see evidence that people are willing to pay for what you built. So you need to be light on your feet. You need to be fast. You don't need to be perfect. It's okay if your product has bugs, your code breaks, right? It shouldn't break. When I say it's okay if it breaks, what I'm trying to say is that it's okay if it's not perfect. The main feature that your user is going to be using, it should be good enough. It should work just enough to give them the results. But if you're not trying to focus on making sure all your lines of code is orderly, you're trying to make sure that you're using the perfect tech stack, all those things, you're just wasting your time. Those things don't add value. They don't help you in any way. For the person who is career focused, tech stack is important because companies, when they start building their app with one particular programming language, they must stick with it for life. That's why you see in job openings, if companies say they're looking for a Python developer, that's because they build their backend with Python or Django. So they need specifically a Python developer. If you're taking an entrepreneur, tech stack does not matter. Use anything you like. No product remains the same. All products that have been validated by the entrepreneur. Remember I talked about this relationship, right? The entrepreneur discovers a product. He needs to iterate on his idea fast enough. If he builds a product, it doesn't work. He goes on to the next idea, he builds, it doesn't work. When he comes across a product that he has built and try to sell it and realize that, oh, there's a demand for it, then he can go on and scale that product into a business and a company and hire specialists. So this is the relationship between the two. The entrepreneur always comes first before the company. The generalist comes first before the specialist, but they both need each other. Now, if you're taking the entrepreneurial route, like I said, you need to be a generalist. You need to understand sales and markets, and you need to know how to get investors. If your goal is to fund your company, go ahead, get investors. If you are just interested in a small company, a business that you can run by yourself, because with software applications, it's easier to run a software app by yourself as a solo founder than it is to run a business that is producing physical products, because you need to hire people for manufacturing, you need to get machines. But software now is very low maintenance. If your goal is to maintain that software by yourself, fine. If you want to get in a CEO and get investors' money so that you can scale your company to like 1 million users, go ahead and do that. That is your choice. But forget about that now. If you're taking entrepreneurial, forget about company for now. Your job is to build your product fast and sell it fast. Also, if you are taking the entrepreneurial route, you don't need to specialize in any particular industry. You can build an application for moms, you can build an application for babysitters, you can build an application for the finance industry, you can build an application for the agricultural industry. Your tech stack does not matter. The industry you focus on does not matter. It's even advisable for you to build applications across different industries. Your job is, just like I said, see a problem. It doesn't matter the industry or the area that problem comes from. You see a problem, ask yourself, can computer technology solve this problem? If it can, build the application, try and sell it to those people that have that problem. If they give you money for it, that's a sign of traction. Then you can now go ahead, get a CEO, get funding, or use your profits to hire specialists right? Front-end developers, UX developers, cloud, whatever it is that you need, and build a company off of that. The last thing with taking the entrepreneurial route is that in terms of finances, remember I said if you're taking the career path, each job is like a stepping stone to the next job. Ideally, you're supposed to be making more money as the years goes by. You have more years of experience. Everything adds up. Now, the entrepreneur, financially, you could be flat for years, completely flat. Then all of a sudden, you build one application and it does really well. And that application is usually that app that turns into a big company like Facebook, like Flutterwave, right? So that can happen. But in order for you to get that, you need to, because there's a bit of luck, you need to build many apps, so many apps. In fact, you need to have the habit of building a new app every month if possible. Look for problems in your surrounding, build a software for it, test it. It doesn't work, move on to the next application, right? So that's how you should be thinking if you're taking the entrepreneurial route, and you should be thinking the other way if you're taking the career route. So you have these options as a developer. If you're trying to get a job and that one is not really doing so well for you, then just build your own thing. Build your own software, build your own application, and see how that goes. Also, there's one last thing I do want to mention. Now, you see, it doesn't matter what path you take. You are not stuck. If you take the career route, you can always switch and build your own thing. I've seen examples of people that they've been working for years in the software industry. They've built the expertise and they realize that career thing is not for me anymore. I really want to build my own thing. That's fine. You just learned to code. And it is very difficult for you to get a job. You can take the entrepreneur, but guess what? Every app you build adds to your portfolio. Even though you build 10 applications and none of them does well, you put all those 10 applications into your portfolio. You are showing an employer that you have real world projects, because you're not doing something like a simple calculator app. You are building real world projects. So that's proof enough. If you're building a career, remember your CV matters. You should not be a generalist. Specialize on one programming language. Specialize on one role. If you can't, specialize in one industry so you can network. If you are taking entrepreneurial route, be a generalist. You don't need to know every single thing. It's okay if your code has bugs. The fact that your product works does not mean that you are going to make money as an entrepreneur. It is the fact that people want your product. Even if your product has bugs, if your product helps, if your product actually hits a specific problem on the head, then you're going to make money from your product. So what matters is not that your product is perfect. It's not that you understand JavaScript A to Z. It's not that you understand Python A to Z. It's not that you can write the perfect code syntax. What really matters is that you discover a market that wants what you have made. So you need to be fast. If you're trying to decide the perfect tech stack, you're wasting your time. You need to have a tech stack. Yes, initially you need to have a tech stack that you are comfortable with and that you can use well. But if you are fretting about, no, MongoDB is better than SQL, you're wasting your time. This button should be green. This button should be red. You are really wasting your time. You just need the minimum. Your user experience should not be bad. It should not be perfect. It should be good enough. That is all. A crash course online is enough to teach you the skills. You take the entrepreneurial route. You want to learn backend, a crash course is enough to teach you the basics so that you can get what you need to do and move on. So that's it. So as a developer, I hate calling myself that name because when you use the word developer, right, you kind of put people in some kind of box, right? Because you are a developer, your job is just to develop only. You have options. If you know how to code, I'm not talking to developers now, so I don't put you guys in a box. I'm talking about you specifically. If you have interest in learning to code, learn to code. But understand that there are two paths you can take with your coding skills. You can either build a career, if that is for you, or you can take the entrepreneurial route if that is for you. After about the pros and cons. So whichever one works with you, fine, go ahead and do that.